Email, what does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or
The
news.
single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part two of my conversation with Jim Sanduski, president of Sharp Home Electronics Company of America. We pick up the conversation as Jim discusses why he leads Sharp as if it were a startup business and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis.
So the reason why I say, Sharp is like a startup business, because first of all, in the home appliance space, kitchen appliance space, Sharp is we're a David in a world of Goliaths. And what I mean by Goliaths is I'm talking about, GE and Whirlpool and LG and Samsung. GE and Whirlpool have been in the business for 100 years, and LG and Samsung, who have been in for more than 2 decades now. So we're a small player today. And unlike our competition has thousands of employees, we literally just have hundreds of employees, and that's including the manufacturing facility we have. And the other part of it, why it feels like a startup company, is because the appliance industry in the United States is so different than say, the appliance industry in our parent company's domestic market, which is Japan. So in the U.S., we have built-in kitchen appliance. We have large refrigerators and large-size wall ovens and ranges, etc. In Asia, it's much more about countertop type of cooking products. And so when we look at the types of products that Sharp would manufacture for the Asia market, they're just not applicable to the United States market. And so that's where the management team that I work with in Japan, they really let myself and my team operate very independently and with a lot of autonomy to determine what's necessary for the U.S. market. So this sourcing initiative that I talked about a little bit earlier was a U.S.-led initiative. It was led by my team and I to source products independently for the U.S. market. And all of these products that we're sourcing are only available in the U.S. market. Even the microwave drawer that I also touched upon earlier, which was conceived in Memphis, Tennessee, is today still only available in the U.S. market. So unlike, say, competitors from Samsung and LG, who will get products that are designed in Korea for the U.S. market, all of the products that we have under the Sharp badge in the U.S. market were really designed and conceived in the United States. So for that reason, as a startup company, it's all about communication. And so I start my day every day at 9:00 with an hour-long discussion every single day with our head of sales and also with the head of our business planning team. And we talk about the day's issues and the decisions that need to be made. And then the next hour, and this kind of goes to also the fact that as a startup company, you wear multiple hats. So my head of sales is also head of brand marketing. And in my case, I wear the multiple hats of being in charge, as we talked about earlier, in charge of manufacturing, in charge of sales and marketing, and also in charge of service. But also because my background has been around product, I also wear the product marketing hat. And so in the second hour of my day, each Monday through Friday, I meet with our product marketing team. And there again, we go through all of the product related discussion topics. And then from there, it evolves into, weekly, check-in calls with the gentleman who heads up our manufacturing facility and with the gentleman who heads up our service organization. And then it's weekly calls with our sales team, where we not only go through our sell-in results to dealers, but we also talk about what the sell-through trends are of our products. And then finally, and this kind of goes to the fact that being a startup company and having just a couple hundred employees, I can have a monthly all-hands meeting in which I talk about what's going on in the business and other aspects about the industry. So from that standpoint, it's we're a startup organization here in the U.S., but I'm under the global umbrella of the Sharp corporate resources together with the Sharp brand. So it's just been just a thrill, to be with Sharp these 11 plus years and counting.
I think what struck me as you were speaking about that is the conversation aspect of you have your call for an hour, and another call for an hour, you have your all hands meeting. And I'm a big fan, a big proponent of conversation as a probably more clear way to communicate about what you want, and you, because you get instantaneous feedback. People ask questions as opposed to the text messages and the emails, which are great, I think, adjuncts. But I think today we've kind of made that the de facto way of communicating, and one-way communication isn't nearly as powerful as what you were alluding to, where you have the all-hands meeting, which I'm assuming is some feedback given and taken. You have your meetings with your head people for an hour each, and you're getting some feedback from them. So I'm a big fan of conversation. It sounds like you are as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the pandemic has, I would say, really accelerated the amount of communication, and that's because of we. Over the course of a weekend, we went from being in the office 5 days a week to being fully remote that we thought would last a couple of weeks, and turned out to be more than a year. And so, pre-pandemic, I was doing all hands meetings once a quarter, and then when we shifted to being 100% remote in the early days of the pandemic, because there was so much uncertainty, I shifted to an all hands meeting once a week.
Wow.
And I did that for about the first 3 or 4 months. And then I kind of backed off and went to every 2 weeks and ultimately went to once a month, which is where I am today with the team. But, because of the pandemic, that really kind of accelerated those type of communications. Now we're not fully back to the office 5 days a week. We're today 3 days a week in the office. But it's interesting where, as we were making decisions about, coming back into the office and, the benefits of collaboration and just camaraderie, and particularly for new employees, getting them to understand the corporate culture of being in person versus, say, working from home, is that I asked the team during the all hands meeting, and I did this through polling, which you can do through Microsoft Teams, is how do you want to come back? And what I mean by that is, do you want to come back choose any 3 days of the week for you to come back, what works best with your schedule? Or do you want us to select where everybody comes back for the same 3 days? And then the other 2 days are kind of work remote optional. I mean, the office is open, you can come in. Overwhelmingly, the team said, no, let's come back to the office 3 days a week and be all together. So again, I was just really, pleased that's what the team's overwhelming selection was, is we want to be all together as a team.
That's music to my ears. I gotta tell you, I'm a face-to-face person, and obviously when you plan major projects, having people in the room to have conversations are so important, and you start to build the relationships. And so, first of all, kudos to you for going to weekly all hands meetings. I would think that as a team member, that would have been very, very meaningful to me to know that my boss's bosses feel strong enough that I want to update you weekly on what's really going on, and that's got to give a level of confidence to me as a team member. So I think kudos on that. And I don't have anything against remote work. It's just that I feel like, and I love the fact they all wanted to come back the same 3 days, because there is those bonds that you build and the camaraderie that you have when you are face to face. And I say this all the time. It's not just the team, the meeting in the room. It's the serendipitous meeting on the way to get coffee, or the conversations that happen. I get to know you as a person as opposed to just an email address. And you touched on it. I'm curious. I wasn't going to ask this, but I will now.
Yeah.
I think that culture, that's one of the things that's challenging. I think if you came on during the pandemic and you never got to meet your team members, you went right to remote and stayed there for a period 18 months, 24 months. How do you learn about the company's culture when you're 100% remote? Because to me, culture is what happens when nobody's looking. Like when you hang up the phone with the customer, and then you say what you say, and I get to hear that. Or how do I figure out who my mentor is going to be in the organization when it's all remote? So how did you guys handle that?
Yeah, so it really kind of varied because bringing people on during the course of the pandemic, you would bring, I mean, there would be some people that you're bringing on, just out of school, right? And it's those people coming right out of school that one had to really pay most attention to. How do you instill company culture? Because they have no experience, right? They have no frame of reference of what it's like, working for a company. And so from that standpoint, it was really just making sure that the manager of that, new employee coming out of school, or just a year or two out of school, that you spend a lot of time one-on-one with them. So that type of mentoring from your manager. For others that, you brought on that maybe had 5 or 10 years of work experience with other companies, I mean, they kind of knew, what it's like to be in a working environment. And so with them, it wasn't quite as critical, but it was more about how, once the pandemic became more clear, vaccinations were available and whatnot, that it was safe to come back to the office. It was about, how do you get everybody just to mix together? And so, from that standpoint, we've done things in terms of getting the teams together outside of the office, outside of the 4 walls of the office, whether that be, when we'd have like sales meetings where we'd bring everybody in, we'd have a sales meeting during the 2 or 3 day session, and then we'd have a team dinner at night. And so that also helped instill what kind of the company culture was like.
Right. So you've been a warrior in many of the format wars, and I have to tell you that everyone I've been on the wrong side of. So from instead of Betamax, I chose Betamax instead of VHS, and then I still have a Toshiba HD DVD player, which does me no good except for the handful of
Have you checked out eBay? That may be worth something these days.
Maybe. And then even there's a predecessor or an early competitor for TiVo. I think it was called Sonic Blue.
Replay TV.
Replay. I had that one. Of course, it lost. I guess it's Hopper now. But anyway, I've been on the wrong side of all these. So I was just wondering, you've been 8mm video to VHS, Blu-ray to HD DVD. What, if anything, did those battles teach you about your leadership style?
Yeah. So one thing that it really taught me is you can't go alone. So it's really about you need allies, right? So if you go back to the very early days of 8mm video, where it's a pitched battle, Sony was the lead champion for the 8mm format, and on the VHS-C side, it was JVC and Panasonic, and so Sony enlisted the support of Canon. So it was about getting other manufacturers to adopt the 8mm format. So, that's one case of needing allies. In the case of Blu-ray, as you said, there was HD DVD, which was Toshiba, which was leading that charge. And with Blu-ray, it was about an alliance between Samsung and Sony and others. And then each camp needed to get the movie studios in their camp, so that you would have movies. And I must say, HD DVD kind of drew first blood in which they got Paramount to release Star Trek, the original 1960s series of Star Trek, on HD DVD. They did a really good job, and that garnered a lot of attention in the industry. And then the Blu-ray camp was able to kind of strike back. I mean, Sony obviously had a big studio in Columbia Pictures. And so there was a number of different movies that were able to be available. And so ultimately, Blu-ray did win out. But again, what the leadership style for me was all about, you can't go alone. You really have to have allies on your side. That's probably number one. Number two is, it's about how do you communicate to the consumers, because ultimately, the consumer is going to vote with their wallet in terms of which format they're going to support. And it's not about features for features' sake, but how do you tout the benefits of a format in ways that the consumer can relate to? So it's really, you sell benefits, consumer benefits, you don't sell features. So that's probably another kind of leadership thing that I learned is how do you communicate that to consumers? And then maybe a third area would be around just getting out there and speaking at conferences and be considered an industry expert in speaking about the subject. Get out there and speak at industry conferences about why Blu-ray. Why is my company aligned around Blu-ray? So, those are probably three areas I would say around leadership.
Okay. And when we span on this, I think I read somewhere that you have an open door policy, and I was curious as to what led to that.
Yeah. So, when I say open door policy, it's I'm a firm believer in. You look at our office facility, it's a completely open style, and it has been for the last. Well, when I first joined Sharp, there were for the leadership or for the senior members of the team, there were offices that lined the windows on each side of the office space. And then you had kind of your bullpen area in the middle. I have to credit, my boss who hired me into the company, who, when we did a renovation of our office facility, he went to an open office style. And so down came all of the individual offices. And it wasn't without some trepidation from some members of the team about, losing the status of having an office with a door to it. But I accepted it and, just had like a cubicle type of area that was good for me. And when I needed more private space, there were actually what we call focus rooms that were available that you could go in, have a one-on-one conversation with somebody, or you could go in and make a phone call if you wanted to have some privacy for a phone call. And so I really credit, my boss at the time, for having that open office layout. And then when we moved a couple of years later to our current office location in Montvale, I ensured that our new office was going to be that exact same style. So, I'm in a corner. I have a corner office location, but there's no walls, there's no doors, and everyone has that type of open office environment, and that really just fosters good communication. And it's also, again, this family style culture that I talk about with Sharp, where, we treat everybody with dignity and respect. And, whether, I encourage people that are, 2 or 3 levels down from me to talk to me, right? To come up, say hello. And I make a point of when I see them to say hello, as I pass them. So you really want to treat people well up and down the organization, just like you would want to be treated. And it also comes, I think, with an attitude of, I trust somebody until I'm proven otherwise. And fortunately, most people that I've trusted, they return that trust in return. So, that's nice as well.
I think that people tend to focus on the negative, and so they always want to talk about the person the bad egg, but in reality, I think there's a lot more good eggs than bad eggs.
Certainly are. There certainly are.
All right. So to wrap up, I always have 3 questions I like to ask. And first one is, are there any leadership principles that speak to you personally and guide your day-to-day behaviors?
Well, one, and I think I just said this a minute ago, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. It's a guiding principle.
So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Best piece of advice. This is a good one. Hire thy heroes. And let me expand upon that. So, I always strive to hire somebody that is better than me. And it's about knowing that if you hire people who are better than you, they're going to do a great job. And in the end, they're going to make you look good. So it's about, you want to have the best talent you can in an organization, and there's no better way to do that than to hire thy heroes.
That's good. And it means you're not afraid to hire people that are better than you.
That's right.
That's good.
Yep.
What's the best book or article you've read recently, and what was the key takeaway?
Well, so I would say something that I learned early in my career, and it's not so much a book or an article, but more of a work philosophy. And something that I learned at GE, and I learned it in my very first year of working at GE, and it has stayed with me throughout my career, and I like to pass it along to to my staff. And it's the concept of completed staff work. And what it's about in a nutshell is that whenever an employee comes across a problem or an issue, that they shouldn't go to their boss and say, "Boy, I have this issue. What do you think?" or "What should I do?" But rather, it's really the responsibility of the employee who's facing this issue to look at it at all different aspects, evaluate the pros and cons, and then go to their manager and say, "I have this issue. This is how I've analyzed it, and this is my recommendation of what I want to do. Do you agree with that?" And so that concept of really undertaking the work of analyzing a problem and not going to your boss and asking them, "What should I do?" has really stuck with me throughout my career.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
I like that one. Well, Jim, this has really been fantastic. I really enjoyed speaking with you today and learned a lot. I'm sure my listeners will as well. Thank you so much for the conversation.
I really enjoyed it as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.